Apart from death, the word burial is no more prevalent than in the world of wrestling. It only takes one loss on TV for the wider community to start screaming that insert favourite wrestler here is being buried, and then we begin yelling about pushes. No wonder those on the outside think we're all nuts. Thing is, over the years, being buried would have actually been preferable to how some talents were treated because it beggars belief. I'm Simon from What Culture. Please do subscribe. This is 10 WWE fates worse than burial. Number 10, Trash Bag Gate. A recent one this, and a very sad story indeed. After Mickie James got released from the WWE in April 2021, she revealed that her personal belongings had been returned to her in a trash bag. That's not the nicest way to treat a former employee. As it turned out, this had been a practice for some time, and while some argued it was just somebody using what they had at their disposal, well, go and get a box. That's just as easy and will allow you to treat these humans with some respect. The clue is in the name. Trash bags are used for garbage. To its credit, WWE swiftly sorted this internally, sending out an apology to all, as well as firing Director of Talent Relations Mark Carano, but still, no wonder Mickie felt the need to share it. After losing your job, it really is the last thing you could ask for, and far worse than being told you have to be defeated in some matches before you go. Number 9, the end of Emma. When Emma was released in 2017, fans were confused. It didn't really add up. She had just been part of 2 bouts against Asuka that were pretty damn good and introduced the Empress of Tomorrow to the main roster. She had just been called up, needed some solid scraps, and Emma was on hand to do just that. 7 days after TLC though, where she did lose to Asuka, she was let go, and ever since she's kind of been deleted from the company. You never see any replays of her era-defining battle versus Paige from NXT Arrival, how she took Dana Brooke under her wing, or the first war she had with Asuka at the original TakeOver. There should be some highlights that pop up here and there, but we don't get a peep. And it could be because she's still active and appearing in rival companies, but even then, remember Emmalina? That is definitely worse than being buried. A brand new gimmick that lasted all of 14 seconds. Number 8, Heath Slater's comeback. On July 6, 2020, Heath Slater returned to the WWE to take on his old buddy Drew McIntyre. While that sounds like standard fodder, what made it so eyebrow-raising was that Slater had been fired months earlier. It's not like he'd been rehired either. This was a one-night-only deal. And if it was to get a pop from a crowd, you could have understood it. But there was no crowd. This was in the midst of fans being banned from venues around the world, so he was kinda just there. It escalated when it was spun as this was Heath fighting for his career, so of course, he lost in 24 seconds after he got kicked in the face. And you can understand it from Slater's point of view, who wouldn't accept a payday after losing their job, but the whole ordeal felt slightly tone-deaf. I just hope Heath had fun. At least that would be something. Number 7, Jinder Mahals push. So this one is different. You wouldn't associate someone being made WWE champion as a fate worse than a burial, but it's just how WWE went about it. They kinda set Jinder up for a fall. And what do I mean? Simple. Back in 2017, within the space of a few weeks, Mahal went from opening match guy, often losing, to winning the richest prize in the game. There was no story, no build, no nothing. One day he was jerking the curtain, the next he was the guy. It was truly crazy. There was no way that a clued up audience was ever going to let that lie, and as such, this was the conversation for essentially the entire year. How did this happen? Why did this happen? And what's going to happen next? The answer was mostly that management wanted to try and monetize the Indian market better and thought a representative from that country would work. Jinder Mahal was born in Canada. That's not to say he wasn't proud of his heritage, he clearly is, but as he hadn't been presented as a star, nobody, no matter where they lived, was going to think otherwise. And fair play to Mahal, he did what he could and certainly grew into the role, but he was never given a chance simply because of the lack of patience such a change needed. Number 6, Zack Ryder is destroyed. Do you know what Zack Ryder's reward was from taking advantage of YouTube and social media before most wrestlers had even figured out what it was? He was pushed off the Raw entranceway courtesy of Kane as he sat in a wheelchair. Bet he was well glad he went and got himself over. Why this happened is up for debate, but it certainly felt like WWE was a little frustrated that Ryder had made himself popular, and therefore the powers that be needed to take charge. And sure, Zack won the US title during this crazy time, but the message it sent to the locker room was if they do try and grab this brass ring, it may come back and bite them in the ass. It was a huge shame, as done right this could have been a lot of fun, especially as Zack Ryder was having his name chanted by fans even when The Rock was in the flipping ring. But no, he was injured in the storyline, cheated on by his girlfriend, and then thrown to his doom. Probably regrets the whole thing. Number 5, the self-destruction of the Ultimate Warrior. This documentary is not on the WWE Network or Peacock. And there's a reason for that. 16 years on from when it was released, the company and the family of The Ultimate Warrior are on the same page, but that was not the case in 2005. Therefore, the decision was made to release a DVD that just laid into Jim Hellwig, ripping him left, right, and center. It was so different to what had come before it, fans were genuinely stunned. The relationship between the Warrior and Vince McMahon was fractured at best, and this felt like the boss just getting all his frustration off his chest, and literally every part of his wrestling career was torn apart. It's why when the likes of Christian and Chris Jericho offer a more balanced opinion, it's even more confusing. Clearly nobody had told them what was actually going on here. This also happened to Bret Hart too, as the company greenlit a production of a similar project that was going to be entitled Screwed, and thankfully the Hitman found out about this and stepped in to assure a much more positive program was made. And you can't blame him. This one was brutal. What the hell would they have done with him? Number 4, the other screw job. Well, before the screw job that we always talk about, Vince McMahon, the Fabulous Moolah, did the same thing with Wendy Richter. This felt low, especially as months before this, Richter had been integral to WWE's Rock and Wrestling connection that had helped launch WrestleMania. It all started when Wendy made it known she wasn't happy with her payoff, all things considered, and that was enough for McMahon to decide he didn't need her around anymore. As such, Richter was booked against the Spider during a November 1985 Madison Square Garden show, where 2 minutes in, this masked competitor rolled Wendy up for the 1-2-3. Problem was, it wasn't a 3 count and ended at 1, but that didn't matter. As it was revealed that the Fabulous Moolah was under the hood, the confused crowd was also told that the women's title had changed hands. Richter then attacked Moolah to carry on what she thought was a story, only for the referee to break it up. It soon clicked that she had been tricked, and then she was let go from the company. Wendy never did wrestle for WWE again, although time as ever heals all wounds, and she accepted an induction into the Hall of Fame 25 years later. So at least she got some credit in the end. But my word, can you believe that we actually did this in the world of professional wrestling? Number 3, Jeff Jarrett is blackballed. Jeff Jarrett has admitted when this happened he thought it was part of a story, and man, how wrong he was. Even after it went down, Double J still rang Vince McMahon in 2002 to tell him he was starting TNA, hoping they could work together, but that ship had long sailed. Following a very controversial departure from the WWF after Jarrett allegedly held the company up for money before heading to WCW, he found himself on the wrong end of that deal when Vincent Kennedy McMahon bought World Championship Wrestling in 2001. It gave birth to the famous simulcast, and the very first thing that Vince did on that show was to announce that Jeff Jarrett was fired. He even spelled this out to rub salt into the wound. McMahon did this while watching that night's Nitro too, but that was all for show. Jeff was seen on screen there, even though if you were tuned into WCW at that time, you wouldn't have seen him. This was all a setup for the chairman of the board so he could boot him out the door and get some kind of revenge. Once again, years later, all was fine and Jarrett rejoined the WWE as a backstage agent, but can you imagine how he felt on that night? Was essentially barred from mainstream American wrestling. And that's why he started his own company. Number 2, being Bray Wyatt. Because seriously, how did this happen? Bray Wyatt is one of the most creative guys to come along in years, and yet for some reason, WWE has decided to take all of his characters and throw him down the toilet. He was burned alive as The Fiend and then lost his big comeback match at WrestleMania versus Randy Orton, was destroyed by Bill Goldberg in Saudi Arabia and lost his Universal title, was saved by a referee when he was facing Seth Rollins in the Hell in a Cell, and pretty much has lost every major feud he's been in. The confusion increases when you learn that he sells a hell of a lot of merchandise, which is usually the saving grace for any sports entertainer, but we have got to the point once more where fans feel like The Fiend is done. That gimmick should have been one he had for life. Within 2 years, it's all but burned out. Pun very much intended. Number 1, Drake Maverick's release. April 15th, 2020 was no fun. A month after a worldwide pandemic left us all confused and worried, WWE released a ton of staff into an environment where jobs weren't exactly easy to come by. This was etched over many of these individuals' faces, especially as their dream job had just been taken away from them, and Drake Maverick's emotional message on social media hit everybody right in the heart. That was a guy who was devastated and you hated to see it. The odd part of this was that at the time Maverick was in a tournament to crown a new Cruiserweight champion. He was kept on to complete his duties, meaning all of a sudden he had a story where he would either win that title and stay with WWE, or lose and be out the door. It was all rather bizarre. This carried on when he was still unsuccessful, but was greeted with a new contract courtesy of Triple H, and while it was obviously great that he was able to find a way back in, it left the rest of the pack in a weird place where nobody knew what was true and what wasn't. We've all moved past it now, which is always the way, but none of this added up for ages. I suppose it's just good that everybody landed on their feet. Know of any other fates that are worse than a burial? Make sure you let us know in the comments below, and then don't forget to like the video, share the video, and subscribe. Then head over to whatculture.com where you can read articles like this. Make sure you come give us a follow on social media, and you're already on the YouTube channel. We would ask you to watch another video. My name is Simon from What Culture. I appreciate you listening and watching as always, and make sure you have a delicious treat today. It will make you feel good right down in your tum-tum.